Do I think he can win a world title if he fights Tyson Fury? No, I don't. Do I think he wins a world title if he has to fight Alexander Usyk again? Strangely, maybe. Welcome to episode 3 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. If you've missed the last 2 episodes, get yourselves together. But now plug into this particular episode. Spencer, interesting week last week. We got to meet Tyson Fury at the press conference for the much fated Chisora fight. Joshua, we wish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What did you take away from seeing Mr. Fury? He was in good form, full of himself, getting £10,000 of Frank Warren for bets for fights that don't happen.
Yep. And donated them bets, didn't he? He donated that money straight to a charity as well, some young girl that was there, which I thought was nice. He was in good form.
I told him to do that, by the way.
Is that right?
I told him to do it at the table. I said to him, never mind all these $500 million for fights and how much money you want for this and how much money you've got for that. What would be really good is if you give this 10 grand to charity. And I got told, when I was young, I got paid £32 for this and I'm keeping 10 grand. So off I went on my little hollybobs to Marbella and then saw a picture of Tyson donating it to a charity. Yeah. How we get this, how we get it. It was a good cause. Listen, he was in good form, wasn't he?
He was in really good form. Yeah, he was in good form. Looking forward to the fight, if I'm honest. Look, it's not the fight we wanted.
No.
But when you go through, it all, Derek Chisora is the next best. One thing you can guarantee with Chisora is you know what you're going to get. He's going to come there and he's going to do it. But look, you go back 2011, 2014 was the last fight they had where he got stopped in 10 rounds. He boxed most of that fight, Fury, as a southpaw as well. And Chisora just couldn't handle him. And so I don't see how it's going to be any different this time. But we can guarantee that Chisora is going to give it some.
But it is what it is. And what we did take away from that conversation with Tyson, who was in good nick, was that he's going to fight for some time now. And whether he changes his mind is a different matter. But look, the framework of this show, for those of you don't know, and if you've missed the first 2 episodes, as I've said, get yourself into gear and go back and watch them, is that we will debate 3 of the hot topics of the week.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to a section of questions and answers that you guys have put to us. So with that in mind, segueing into the first topic, Eddie Hearn has been the subject of much, I don't know, mirth and mayhem, but much opinion recently. I called him a coward. I don't mean that Eddie Hearn is a coward, full stop, because I know that he fronts, so I thought he was cowardly in the way that he handled the situation surrounding the debacle, which he in part was a big part of, with the kind of Benn, Chris Eubank situation. He's always had a reputation in boxing, which I think sometimes is slightly unfair because he's one of the few promoters, with due respect, that pays his fighters when they should. Be paid on time on Monday morning after their fight. They're paid, no arguments, no disputes. And that needs to be applauded and lauded because that's often not the case elsewhere. But how damaged do you think, Spence, as a former fighter, is he in the eyes of the media? Is he in the eyes of what I think is the most important part of it, the boxing fans? When you look at Eddie's reputation now, the Joshua fight fell through. People have started to point their finger. I noticed that Bob Arum pointed his finger at Eddie Hearn. And of course, this fiasco around Conor Benn. What do you think of the landscape for Eddie?
Well, listen, I think as it stands at the moment, I mean, he's your mate at the moment, isn't he, Eddie? I see on the stories there. He put, look, I've got it on here. I think Simon does a good job mostly. It can't be easy for him. I think he was reacting to, obviously, the criticism we'd already given him on previous shows.
Well, you know what that dig's about, don't you? I mean, quite frankly, there's only one thing worse than people talking about you is people not talking about you. But that's a little dig saying, what it must be like to have been a former Premier League club owner and a multi-millionaire that's now coining his trade through the media. Doesn't know what he's talking about, doesn't understand why people are in the media. But it's a sly dig, and if I was in his shoes, I might have made the same noise. The fact that people are getting their cages rattled is probably why he's biting back at people like me. But do you think, because he's got this reputation, people boo him when he goes in the ring. Yeah. I think he's a good promoter. I don't always agree with it. I think sometimes he can be a little bit away of himself. Yeah. But do you think he's damaged now?
I think that he hasn't had a good couple of weeks, that's for sure. Yes, he is a good promoter, and I think he's sort of revived boxing in a way. You know, when it was going a little bit stale, I think Eddie Hearn was really good for the sport. He come back and he sort of rejuvenated it really and put a new spin on it, made it more modern. And I think he's done a great job. But the last couple of weeks, he's had a bad couple of weeks and he is damaged goods at the moment. Obviously, for these well-documented reasons. I mean, especially the AJ fight falling through was...
What did Bob Arum say about that?
Yeah, Bob Arum said that he believes it was Eddie Hearn's fault, only Eddie Hearn's fault. He didn't want the fight.
Being unresponsive.
Being unresponsive, yeah. The fight could have been made, and it wasn't made. And I know Eddie was talking about commercials, etc. But I know Anthony Joshua wanted the fight. Yep. And I know that for sure. And obviously Fury, Frank Warren. So, you know.
But what do you think to the observation that Fury made about, I control my business?
Yeah.
Because I made the observation to Tyson Fury. Yeah. Why don't you get out of the way, keep your trap shut, and let your promoters make the fight? Because it didn't help that you were in the background giving ultimatums. And Fury's attitude, and I said, and Anthony Joshua, I believe, wanted this fight. And Fury's reaction was, I control my business.
Yeah.
I tell people what goes on, and I kind of concur with that.
Yeah.
So if we're going to make the argument that 258, right?
Yeah.
And Eddie Hearn are the reasons why this fight didn't happen, and Anthony Joshua wanted the fight to happen. Shouldn't we also be following the logic that Tyson Fury says, which is I control my business.
I agree.
And my guys do what I tell them to do.
Ultimately, it comes down to the fighter, doesn't it? Like, the fighter's got the final say. If he says, listen, I want the fight, then the fight has to happen. See, but Tyson Fury is a different animal to Anthony Joshua, as in Joshua can... Like, so Joshua's like a sponge. He soaks up a lot of information and he sort of like processes it. And he's obviously had these conversations with 258, with Eddie Hearn, because when I had spoke to him, he wanted the fight. Then that had sort of changed and things had moved around and whatever. So I don't know the ins and outs of it totally, but you just feel that maybe he might have been talked out of having this fight at this time. Because like you say, I think that he has the final say. If it was Tyson Fury and he wanted that fight on December the 3rd, and the reverses were if the roles were reversed, that fight would have happened because Fury would have said, no, I'm having the fight. But Joshua may have been talked out of it and they may have presented him with a different roadmap for the next 12 months, say. You know, where we say, right, we're not fighting this year now. He's going to fight early part of next year. They might take him on the road. He might do a different couple of countries or whatever. But it's a shame that it didn't happen. But yeah, I think that he may well have been talked out of that fight happening, if I'm honest.
I think, going back to Eddie Hearn, I think predominantly, despite the background and noise, and people, there's a lot of envy in life, right? And people look at things and they want to ridicule someone because they are slightly coveting what they've got. I believe, despite my departure from the way Eddie Hearn operated with the Conor Benn, Chris Eubank, I think he's a force for good in boxing.
Yeah.
I think he gets up people's noses because he's in your face and he's confident, and sometimes people mistake confidence for cockiness and arrogance, and he can be a little bit like that, but you know what?
You can't deny
what?
Yeah, I
you can't
agree.
deny
you can't deny how, you know, ultimately, I'm with you. You can't deny that Eddie Hearn is only good for the sport, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think I think he brings something to the game. He's a grafter, he's out there, like you say, he delivers, pays fighters on time. So you can't knock him for that. I just think he's having a bad couple of weeks.
What about some of the fights that are coming up that Eddie's putting on? You've got Dillian White.
Yeah.
Fighting Jermaine Franklin.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got Bivol fighting Ramirez.
That's a good fight.
Good fights.
That's a good fight. And I like that fight for Dillian White as well. You've got also what we got October the 29th. You've got Katie Taylor going October the 29th. That's a good fight. So look, you can't knock what Eddie's doing. He's delivering, to be fair. He's putting the shows on. And yeah, they're good shows. I'm not knocking anything that he's doing, if I'm honest. I think that what he's doing is good. Yeah. Simon, I've got a question for you, actually. We're talking about Eddie Hearn before we move on from this. Where do you rank him at the moment in the current crop of promoters, like with, let's use Frank Warren, Benn Shalom, and Eddie Hearn? Who do you think at the moment is in that prime position?
But they're all very different, aren't they? I mean, Frank and George, specifically Frank, are very old school, came from a background of having to break up a cartel with Mickey Duff and Terry Lawless and punch his way through metaphorically to get himself into position, Frank. And he's got a reputation that precedes him in certain respects. I happen to think he's a great promoter. I think he's a character. You look at Benn Shalom, he's young. Ben has got all of the dynamics and understands all the verticals, wants to bring boxing into a different space, and wants to be very innovative. And then you've got Eddie, probably, with no disrespect to Frank or George, is probably the gold standard in people's minds, because of the Joshua Express and what that brought with it. But if you look at the roll call of fighters and fights that he's putting on, when you got Canelo Alvarez in the stable, you know you're in a situation. So I think they're all very different.
But Eddie's doing it sort of globally, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I think the one that's got the chance more than anything else is Ben Shalom. Now, of course, he's got an exclusive relationship with Sky, which necessarily means that you have a paymaster to some extent. But I think he's young and ambitious, and at 27 years of age, if you can make... And I particularly like the nature of the fight that they put on with Parker and Joyce, where you put aside the typical sort of willy-waving mentality
Old school,
and not making fights, and got two promoters to make a fight, get past all the BS of who doesn't like who and whose fight it was and where it should be shown and who controls the event, and actually got a situation where two heavyweights that were ranked appropriately were fighting for a legitimate fight. Yeah. So... I got to give chapeau to all of them. If I was giving it 1, 2, and 3, if you'd have asked me before Conor Benn and Chris Eubank, I would have said Eddie, Frank, Benn.
Yeah.
Right? Because of the collateral damage as a result of the poorly handled situation with a Joshua fight, because I do put it at Matchroom's door, and I do put it at 258's door, right? And because of the debacle fiasco, an absolute bringing into disrepute of the boxing world with Conor Benn and Chris Eubank, I'd probably move Frank now to the top, Ben Shalom second.
How does he do it, Frank? Like, how many years has he been going? He goes like
precisely that,
and he keeps delivering, doesn't he? He keeps bouncing back. Just when you think like he goes through those stages where you go, I don't know how long Frank's got left.
He's a cutie. Yeah, he's a sweetheart, Frank, because there's an iron fist and a silk glove there, right? This congenial, convivial, smart little handkerchief is one thing. Frank doesn't muck about. George is also incredibly dynamic, George's son. Right. So they're a good foil for one another. He's P.T. Barnum, and George is making the deals happen, and Frank is controlling the circus at the front.
Sure.
So I think right now, as we sit right now, because of the damage reputationally that Eddie will overcome. Yeah. Because it's yesterday's news.
It's just a couple of bad
There will be, I think it's Frank right now, I think it's Ben, and I think it's Eddie. Right. That's how I see it. And
that's how you position them. And what
Ben, and of course people go, what? They can't have that. That's because you like Ben. No, I like Ben because I think he's got the balls, the chutzpah, and the outlook to perhaps take boxing to a different level. And he's got the age and the ambition. If he surrounds himself with the right people, who knows? Anthony Joshua. Yeah. And the landscape that's coming, or the scenarios that are coming down with him, we're hearing that he's now. I thought he had to fight by December. I thought contractually, Zone had to have him out by December. We're now hearing perhaps in January.
February time they're talking about now.
It's on the slate for him to fight 41-year-old Chris Arreola. Yeah. I don't know what your reaction to that is.
Look, my reaction to it is obviously disappointment, because I wanted to see him in with Fury. You know, I wanted to see him back in. I don't think he was damaged.
But that's gone.
Yeah, that's gone, right? So
who does he fight in terms of...
Arreola is like, look, it's a good fight to come back and get back on the winning streak with. But it's not like when he lost to Usyk last time out, it was a convincing loss. It was one of those fights that... So I don't think it's like... He doesn't need a confidence builder. Do you know what I'm saying?
Anthony doesn't need a confidence builder.
No, because his confidence won't be shot from losing to Usyk again.
Okay, well, you got Frank Warren, and you didn't challenge him the other day. You got Frank Warren saying on air, I think the next guy goes in the ring with Anthony Joshua can knock him out. Yeah. He's there to be knocked out. But you're saying he doesn't need a confidence builder.
No, I don't think he needs a confidence builder.
But if he's that fragile...
He's not. Yeah, but who says he's that fragile?
Frank. I just said Frank,
No, I don't think he's fragile at all.
So you've got a guy that's in...
I don't think he's a fragile
mental meltdown after the fight.
Yeah, I agree. Right?
And in disarray, and if we hear certain things, we know that he struggles with certain things. A guy that needs to go into to fights, allegedly asking other trainers in front of a world title fight, how would you fight this fight? Yeah. You don't think he needs some confidence?
Well, no, you put it like that. That's fair play, but I'm just speaking to him. I'm speaking to the person that I know. What I'm saying is, Joshua, right now, Arreola's a great fight to come back with because it gets him back on a winning streak, and stylistically he's perfect for Joshua, and I think Joshua takes him out and does it in good fashion, and then he's back in the mix. But where do you put? I think what Frank was talking about is, and this is the worry for me with Anthony Joshua is that next tier of fighters just before that elite level. Yeah. You know, like your Joe Joyce's. Who else have we got? Hrgovic, Daniel Dubois. Yeah. Them guys, I don't want to see Joshua win with them guys because there's a good chance he could get beat. And that's why I said, when he was offered that fight with Tyson Fury, I'm like, mate, take it, because that's where you need to be. And it's like,
But if he gets
S or bust.
But if he
S or bust, as in you can get all the marbles back straight away.
But that's not cool for school, is it?
Well, it depends.
He's 32, 33 years of age. He doesn't need S or bust. He needs to be able to rebuild himself so that he can have a proper tilt to do something back. I actually think, despite what people may have thought or have any interest in what my view on it was, I actually think this is a sensible fight for him to take.
Yeah.
Because he needs precisely that. Now, the guy's gone in. His last 2 fights have been Andy Ruiz Jr. And Kaunaki. And both of those, I think, points decisions. So nothing compelling about those. He's fought Bermane Stavern. He's fought Deontay Wilder. It seems he fought Vitaly Klitschko. I don't see too many top names on his resume, albeit the fact he's been around forever and a day. I actually think this is sensible business. I would prefer to see bona fide live ones. I don't think this is a live one. I don't think it's got any jeopardy in it for him. But I think that if we're going to see...
Where do you see the roadmap for Joshua over the next, let's say the roadmap over the next 12 months for Anthony Joshua? Let's say his next 3 fights. Where do you think he can win a world title again?
Depends who he has to fight to get it. Do I think he can win a world title if he fights Tyson Fury? No, I don't. Do I think he wins a world title if he has to fight Alexander Usyk again? Strangely, maybe. Because I think there was such a bridging of the gap between the first and second fights that there's still a possibility if he believed in himself some more, and who am I to tell an elite fighter how to operate, but if he believed in himself some more and sat down on his punches a little bit more and put himself within range a little bit more, I think he could do even more damage to Alexander Usyk than some of the damage he was beginning to do in the second fight. It depends where they land. It depends what happens with these belts when it becomes an undisputed. It depends if the WBO splinters off and who he has to fight for it. Because then he might have to fight Daniel Dubois. He might have to fight Joe Joyce for those belts. And I worry for him about the damage he can inflict upon Joe Joyce, because I don't think he can get Joe Joyce out of there. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think the Areola fight is a sensible fight. I think it's strategically business based. I don't think it should be a £29 pay-per-view fight. I think it should be a fight that ultimately it will be on DAZN, won't it? So it should have no real premium attached to it. If they try and take a premium for it in terms of charging a pay-per-view, then they're taking a liberty with people. But I think it's right and proper. You're all right. You okay? Is he going to make it? The question is. But I think I actually think, despite all the furore, because these two boys, Fury and Joshua, have become victims of their own ambition, because this fight never really was on the cards to happen. So everyone's judging it by that. Fighting Areola at 41, who hasn't fought for 18 months, I think it's sensible to rebuild his confidence. He takes another fight after that, maybe in March and April, of a mediocre level again, whoever that can be. I don't know whether it can go in with Ortiz or whether he's too old, or one of the other guys that you can mention in a second. And then you've got Joshua back in some sort of mental momentum-based condition. And whatever he does, people will knock it. Whatever he does.
I believe that.
So with that in mind, why don't you tell me the roadmap for Anthony Joshua, all things being equal?
So look, Areola, get back on the winning streak, because that's a sort of guarantee. Like you say, maybe a confidence builder.
I hope that's the correct pronunciation, because it's actually a part of a woman's boob, isn't it? Areola.
Areola is it is correct. Okay. And so I didn't know that, but thanks for that information.
There you go, lesson in biology for us all.
So I think Areola, and then after that fight, does Eddie take him on the road? Does he try and take him to China to box Zhang, who lost to Hrgovic, which is a dangerous fight? It's dangerous, because I thought actually Zhang done very well against Hrgovic. I think Hrgovic was done well there to get away.
It was a brutal fight, wasn't it?
It was a brutal fight, and he had to dig deep. And there was a couple of times when he looked like he was questioning himself, Hrgovic. I think that was a good development fight for him, as in to elevate him onto that world stage. Because Zhang, although he's about 39, 40, he's dangerous and he's big. But when you go in with those sort of guys, they're all tough fights. And Joshua, he's in danger then of getting beat before he gets that world title shot. But also, if he's going to become world champion again, he's got to go through these guys. So that's on the flip side. So I see it, maybe someone like that, maybe Hrgovic or Zhang after Areola, and then he's got to be challenging for that world title again. He needs to get himself back in that mix. He doesn't need too many confidence builders.
These sort of fights, because the big thing that we accused him of, not so much accused him of, but observed on, was this necessity, for want of a better expression, to get back to the sort of eye of the tiger, the hunger, the desire, the absolute focus on winning fights, and being and going in there and stopping people and being very brave in doing so. Do you think these kind of fights that they're going to manage him through, build his confidence back, are going to help him with that going back to basics? Because we talked about the need when he fought Usyk, that he had to get not so much balls, because that's a really unfair observation to make about a professional fighter, but he had to get back to basics. He had to get back to the wrecking machine before Vladimir Klitschko knocked him down. He
needs to find the rawness that once took him to that world heavyweight title.
Can he find them in those fights, though?
Well, do you know what it is, Simon? It's the psychological damage that's been done. So this is how it will be, right? So some fighters, when they've had that knocked out of them, like, so he's been knocked out now. That Ruiz knockout was a bad one. Like you say, I think the damage started to be done from the Klitschko first knockdown.
It wasn't a knockout, was it?
It was a slow, systematic beating, really, if I'm honest. And then, like you say, the referee...
I know we're off on a tangent. I thought it was a swallow.
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Who am I to say that? But I'm asking you as a former fighter. I know he's your mate.
The referee was looking at him, and he went, walk forward.
Yeah.
Now, a fighter normally would just go... I've seen fighters walk forward that are like on rubber legs, man. They're like, they're going like that, and the ref's going, "You're all right?" And they're going, "Yeah." And I'm looking at him going, "No, he ain't all right. He ain't all right." But with Joshua's situation, he leant back on the ropes. The referee went, walk forward, and he didn't want anymore. He didn't want anymore. But I think there was a problem going into that fight anyway. The ring walk, you could see that there was definitely something going on behind the scenes there that was not right. Anyway, so that happened, and he's just like, so from the psychological damage, I don't know, and this is what we need to see, is if he can. I don't know if he can rediscover that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he can rediscover it, because even though in his own head, this is how a fighter will be going, he'll be going, right, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to be a wrecking machine, I'm going to go in there, I know what I've got to do, I've got to take it to him, find out Royce. But when the bell goes,
and he gets some.
The psychological damage, as soon as they go, they're like, you can see that they don't want to commit, because they know if they commit, and because he's been knocked out a couple of times and been hurt a few times, but also from the opponents. From the opponents,
he's not invincible.
It's
a bit like what happened to Tyson once.
That aura of invincibility.
Yeah.
Once you lose that, they get hit and they think, I've only got to hit him, and that's where he's dangerous now. That other fighters now will fancy it, because they know that he's still the golden goose, as in with the cash cow.
Yeah, you get paid.
You get well paid.
But it's a circle that we'll not know if we can square until he fights someone other than Alexander Usyk.
Yeah.
The Ruiz fight, when he got beat, was disappointing. He went back and got his belts. He did what he needed to do to get his belts back, but it wasn't him imposing himself upon Ruiz. It was him making sure he got his belts back.
Just played sense.
Smartly. We'll consistently rumble on about Anthony Joshua until he goes in and wins his next fight, which inevitably he will do if he's fighting Chris Arreola, or if he doesn't, it's up, isn't it? It's finished. Now, moving on from Anthony Joshua.
Just quickly, before we do move on from Joshua, just a yes or no, do you think he'll win a world title again?
I don't know. Again, it depends upon who he has to fight to achieve that. If they manage him through and he hasn't got to fight Tyson Fury, or possibly Alexander Usyk, then yes, I think he can. Again, I think there's questions about Deontay Wilder. If Deontay Wilder were to manage to get a splintered version of the belts because somehow there's a breakup of the belts, and he fought him, there's a question there. And I know people were outraged, specifically Tyson, about the fact that I thought, Joshua would be a harder fight for Fury than Wilder was. But I think there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And we'll only know the answers once we see a rebuilt and recalibrated Anthony Joshua.
Sure.
And someone that's together. He hasn't been together for a while now. And, we've heard a lot of background noise about fights being made with Fury. Let him get in a ring. Let's see what we've got in front of us. And then we can start seeing it. But if it's Fury and Usyk, despite the fact that I think he'll get closer to Usyk, I think he's more likely to be Usyk than he will Fury, and people will say probably I'm miles off.
Does he beat Joe Joyce right now?
He may do because of experience, but I don't think he fights Joe Joyce anytime soon, because Joe Joyce has got forward momentum.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or we don't, whether we think this is right or wrong, Anthony Joshua has to rebuild.
Sure.
He's on a foundation which isn't very solid. Joe Joyce is on a solid foundation.
Yeah.
He knows that he's winning all his fights. He's overcoming what people think he couldn't overcome, which started with Daniel Dubois and has moved on there. I mean, I thought he'd beat Joseph Parker, but he did remarkably well in that fight because he's shipped a lot of punishment.
I've got to be honest, I didn't think he'd beat Parker. I still thought that Parker would have too much for him, and I thought after Parker's last performance against Chisora, I thought, you know what, I think this is again. I'm fed up with going against Joe Joyce because every time you do, like when he boxes a lesser opponent, he doesn't box particularly well, and you think, wow, this geezer's taking too many shots and rare. But then when he steps up, like he did against Dubois, because we had, You thought that
I thought
he
Dubois
would
would beat him,
yeah, that's right, yeah. So I did as well, and I thought, no, this is too much.
I think
for
most
Joyce.
people did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even Frank Warren said it the other day. He figured that Daniel Dubois would beat him. Daniel Dubois probably actually learnt more from that fight than he lost, albeit that he got some criticism from people like David Hay that thought he'd swallowed and then had to retract all that. But the bottom line is we're going off just a second on Joe Joyce. He deserves a seat at the top table, and no one's going to fancy him. And even Tyson Fury will have a handful of trouble with him. Now, segueing out of the heavyweights into the sort of legendary category, because it's an interesting question. Floyd Mayweather and this constant dalliance with these exhibition, so-called meaningful, what I consider to be meaningless fights. What do you make to this? I mean, the guy comes, in the ring, undeniably, one of the greatest of all time. I don't like what he stands for. No. I don't like all this, money Mayweather nonsense and some of the inelegance. I don't like some of the background of the way he's lived his life with domestic violence and so on and so forth. But, those without sin cast the first stone, so I'm not going to sit here judging him for that. But this departure into this cynical need to be involved in these stupid, low-level, low-rank events that pay him a lot of money, what do you make of this in terms of tarnishing his reputation, and what do you make of it full stop?
I'm disappointed in it, really, if I'm totally honest, because Mayweather, like you say, has built his legacy, and his legacy is cemented, and he will go down as one of the greatest fighters of all time. And then to go into like his next fight, when is that, November the 13th or something like that, against Deji, which is KSI's brother, who I actually promoted their first fight when he lost to Jake Paul, Deji. And
yes, we know, you told us before.
But I think he lost 3 or 4 fights on the spin. Then he had one win last time out against another YouTuber or whatever. Then all of a sudden he's boxing like one of the greatest fighters pound for pound of all time, and you just think, why are you doing that? Like, do you know what I mean? Is it financial reasons? Is he running out of money? Because
28 million for fighting.
Yeah, I know, but that's obviously why he's doing it, for the money side of things. But I just think that, I'm not a fan of it, Simon, if I'm totally honest. I think I think that they've got their own thing to do, the YouTubers, and they're doing their own thing, and we can't deny that, they're hitting huge numbers. I mean, that show we talked about last week, that Misfits show or whatever, and I showed you that the bout with them 2 girls. I went, I just don't think it's good for the sport. I just think that...
How many views did it get, though?
Exactly. This is the thing. The numbers are hitting amazing.
I think where we get disappointed, insofar as we have a right to be disappointed, it's one thing accepting that there's a new evolution in broadcasting and a new space and new content and everything for everyone. Every seat, every backside has a seat, right? Yeah. So there's something for everybody. But when you start taking legends out of one part of the sport and superimposing them into another, and it's all about money.
Together. I think it's good the YouTubers doing their thing or whatever. Just do, you stick to that, but don't do the crossover with the professional boxers, the Hall of Famers, etc., and boxing these YouTubers. I think it's sad to see. Did you see that one on the undercard of, who was it, Jake Paul? Yeah, Evander Holyfield, when he got knocked out by the guy, the UFC guy. Yeah. And I just thought, mate, he's a boxing icon, legend,
and real deal.
Getting knocked out in 2 rounds, and I just think, how sad is that? I think it's sad. That's probably the best way to put it.
The only thing that's not sad about it is their bank balances afterwards, and that's the world we live in. If people want to watch, people will watch people trying to solve a Rubik's cube, and YouTube will generate the revenue that it generates. Yeah. When you think of Floyd Mayweather, and of course we think a lot of him because his unblemished record, the levels that he fought at, the people that he fought. And some of them obviously were slightly disappointing because we all agreed they were slightly past their sell-by date when some of these fights happened. Sure. But I remember the beating that he gave to Ricky Hatton, albeit Ricky was in the fight for a period of time. Yeah. Where do you think he ranks? We look down and we have to do this. It's one of those things that you feel the necessity to do in sport, which is always look back and say who, what, when, why, and how. Where does he rank in the pantheon of great fighters?
Great fighters.
Yeah. Well, look, not just for his division, but
I think so. There's been some great fighters over the years, and people that come to mind was that, the fabulous 4, like the Leonard, Hearns, Duran, Hagler, and they were all around his sort of weight. Started off as lightweights, and apart from Hagler, who was obviously a middleweight for his whole career. When you look at Leonard, Hearns, and Duran, they all started off as lightweights, like Floyd did as well. They all started off as lightweights and moved through the divisions because they are great. I'm going to throw it back to you here. I'm going to bounce this one back to you, actually, and say, let's take these three. So we've got Sugar Ray Leonard, yeah? We've got Duran, Roberto Duran, and we've got Thomas Hearns.
Yep.
How do you see Mayweather with going in with them in their prime and Mayweather in their prime? Do you think that Mayweather would beat all three of them, or if any of them?
I think they'd all beat him.
I'm with you.
I think they'd all beat him.
I'm so glad you said that, because I do as well. Like a lot of people rank, Mayweather as the greatest fighter of all time because of his 50-0 record and all that. It's all about eras and that as well. And when you was around, you had Leonard, Hearns, Hagler and Duran. You had them, and there was no politics. They all fought each other, but the fights, man. Like anyone that's not seen them, go back on YouTube, watch them. Like when you watch Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns. Oh man!
But when you watch Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roberto Duran and all the background to it, where where Roberto Duran's insulted his wife. And gone in there, and everyone felt that that there was no way he could win this fight, and he just ground Sugar Ray Leonard down. Then you have the rematch, which is the no mas.
Yeah, fight no mas.
When he just boxes his head off, and in the end, Roberto Duran has. And you look at the Tommy Hearns. You watch Tommy Hearns obviously fight Marvin Hagler in a different weight class, but notwithstanding it, in this one, you look at the fights and you think, what a generation of fighters. And we had some great British fighters. We put some great British fighters in there.
Yeah, we did.
Dave Boy Green went in, didn't he? And got knocked spark out by Sugar Ray Leonard.
But it was a great era, that. But I'm glad you said that, because I think that, they all three of those would have beat them. So
you've got away from the original question. The original question was, where does Floyd Mayweather rank across, as I say, the pantheon of all fighters? He's a 50-0. He's up there with Rocky Marciano, with Joe Calzaghe, who, by the way, never got enough of a reputation or recognition, more to the point.
I'm going to put him in the top 5 of all time.
And who would be in front of him then?
The three that we've just mentioned.
Tommy Hearns. Tommy Hearns would be in front of him.
No, maybe not actually. No, Tommy Hearns wouldn't be in front of him. No, sorry, I'm thinking Marvin Hagler. I'd put Marvin Hagler in front of him.
Sugar Ray. Roberto Duran. Yeah.
Okay. He'd probably come in at number 4, actually. Yeah.
Q&A part of the show.
Yeah.
3 quick fire questions. Christian asks, what's the best ring walk you've ever seen? Live.
Best ring walk I've ever seen would be the convention centre in Atlantic City. Nassim Hamed, when he beat Wayne McCulloch, and it was Halloween, October the 31st, 1998, if my memory recalls me right. And he come in, do you remember he come into Thriller, and he had all the stones around him, but it started off with him, he was playing the organ, and he had a big black hood on him and all that, and he jumped up and he come into Thriller and he was knocking the gravestones over and all that. I thought, like, as an entertainment value, I thought that was superb. And actually, the funniest one I've ever seen quickly was that one. Do you remember that kid, Hussein Hamid, and he boxed a kid called Ashley Sexton.
Yeah, came in, spun over the ring, got knocked out in the first round.
He did, but when he come in, he had the gold chain on, and he was doing all the dance. It's hilarious. You can get that on YouTube, actually. Hussein Hamid
walked out, got knocked out in the first minute.
He did.
First punch of the fight.
And Ashley Sexton, the kid that knocks him out, that was for the vacant English title, and that was in around 2010, something like that. But he used to be trained by my dad, that Ashley Sexton, as an amateur right up until he turned professional. Like, really nice kid. But yeah, you got to check that out on YouTube. That's funny.
I would say.
What about you?
Tyson. Both from watching it from a television point of view, but having seen him walk in against Frank Bruno in 1989 when he beat him first time around, when Tyson was in his pomp, and there was this aura of menace.
Yeah.
No big, no big fun and dancing, and no big Apollo Creed-esque entrance. Just black over towel, black boots, marching to the ring, ready to go, and the menace that went with it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I saw him fight in Memphis, Tennessee, where he fought Lennox Lewis, and he came in, and he could only be licensed in Memphis because of all the challenges he'd had with biting Evander Holyfield and whatever else. And he came in, and all the security guards were in the middle of the ring, so it was less spectacle and more.
You felt the presence.
Yeah, you felt that what was about to happen was something that was going to be not so much compelling, but there was going to be something dark at the end of it. And Mike Tyson, and of course, if you look back to camera ones, the most memorable, ring walk for me, tragically, was the one for Frank Bruno walking in against Tyson in '96, I think it was, when you knew Frank was just I think.
He was terrified.
Yeah.
He was like a rabbit in the headlights, weren't he? But yeah, you're right. But I done one Mike Tyson fight actually up in Scotland. Was it Hampden Park?
Lewis
Savaris, yeah. And I was working on that for talkSPORT actually. He was commentating, and like the presence of the man when he walked in the ring and he walked past you. You're right. There was that. I've never had that before.
Talking of Tyson, Big Baz asks, have you ever met Don King?
No, I've been in his presence, but I've never met him. So I've been at a couple of shows where it's sort of, let's walk past, Don, how you doing? Like, I've never had a conversation with him. Fascinating guy, colourful character, mad background. You know how he got into boxing, how he ended up promoting the biggest heavyweight title fight of all time in Zaire, which was just.
Well, he was a Cleveland numbers runner that was convicted of murder, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so he had a background that some might say is perfect for certain segments of boxing. I met him a couple of times. I met him again at the Tyson Lewis fight in Memphis, Tennessee, because I was sat there. He was there, and LL Cool J was over there, and I was wearing a very smart pair of black and white brogues, and LL Cool J was like, "Man, where'd you get those swing tips from?" But you know, I started to get in a conversation with Don King, and he was off with, this is the greatest show in the world. This is the greatest place. This is America.
He could sell
you Brits
snow
don't
to
know
the
anything.
Eskimos. Yeah.
I'm like, well, we know a thing or two. Right? We know enough that we're going to take the belts back to London. That's what we know. But he was an interesting character, and of course, I met him at a couple of other fights in Vegas, and he was always very verbose. I found him quite pleasant.
Yeah.
I got sat next to him, and I tell you who I found pleasant as well was Donald Trump, because he was at one of the fights.
Right.
And I got talking to him very briefly, albeit. And they're just engaging characters.
Yeah.
But Don King, albeit that most fighters, and certainly Tim Witherspoon, will look back on their relationships with Don King with a great deal of resentment. Yeah. He was a force of nature. And when you were in his company, which I was a couple of times, as I said, he was one of those that, you felt you had to speak quickly just to get in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final question. Ryan wants to know if you could bring back, or I could bring back, or collectively, or individually, if we could bring back a fighter to fight now, who would you pick?
A fighter to fight now that was in his prime, yeah. Yeah, all right, that's a great question.
Pick him out of history.
Yeah, that's a great question. Who I would pick? I would pick a fighter that I would bring back now just from a personal reason. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, is Marvin Hagler, because I just think the guy was
marvellous.
Marvin Hagler in his prime was insane, and I think one of the best ever. But I think Mike Tyson. You'd have to go Tyson.
You've stolen my life. Because I was going to say one or two things from a personal investment, because I was always very fond of Lloyd, and it was one of the first fights I went to see. I went over to Atlantic City to fight him, see when he fought Cobra Curry. Pound for pound, the best fighter in the world. Lloyd Hunnigan given no chance. Bashed the bejesus out of Donald Curry. And I went to see Lloyd a few times fight in Marbella, where I was living at the time, when he fought Gene Mad Dog Hatcher and Johnny Bumpus, went off the stall and hit him off the first 30 seconds. Crazy. But I would be Tyson as well. And I think it's a generational thing. I'm a bit older than you, but when I grew up watching Tyson, this to me, I know that the Larry Holmes era was probably unfairly categorized because he was a great fighter. But when Tyson is running through Berbick, running through Spinks, knocking out Tyrell Biggs, knocking out Tony Tucker, knocking out Tony Tubbs, getting into a war with Bone Crusher Smith, and just demolishing everyone, that to me was the embodiment. And you see him on a front cover of magazines with this 23-inch neck or whatever he had, and everyone going, what in God's name is this? So I would bring Buster Douglas, pre-Robin Givens, I would bring Mike Tyson back purely and simply because he was the embodiment of a heavyweight champion. Sonny Liston meets a new version of a heavyweight fighter. Yeah, I totally agree. Do you know what? 1986, when he knocked out Trevor Berbick, was a time I was about 11 years of age, I think it was then. Getting up and listening to this guy on the radio with my dad at like 4 in the morning, that's what he brought to the game. He was like, globally, he was probably the most famous man on the planet at the time. You know, when he was in his early 20s, 21, 22. It was a throwback, wasn't it? Yeah. It was the fact that I'm not coming into the ring with any showmanship. The showmanship was, I'm going into that ring, no gown, black boots. I'm knocking you out, and that's what I'm going to do. Of course, he departed into some vulgarities and some poor behaviour, but at one particular moment, and we could also go down the route of Muhammad Ali and a variety of other people, but for me, Tyson, heavyweight boxing, at that time, from 86 to the beginning of 1990, was the bomb, for want of a better expression. I'm on that. Right, that's it for episode 3 of Talk Boxing, myself and Spencer Oliver. Thank you for all your questions. Keep them coming. And of course, don't forget to keep liking and subscribing. Both myself and Spencer will look forward to seeing you next week with another deep dive and forensic look at the world of boxing.